Hi, Stephen. Oh, you're on mute. There we go.
They've changed it since I last used Zoom, obviously.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our series of interviews with members of the Caritas Consort. My name is Paul Rothwell, and today I'm joined by Stephen Power, who sings countertenor and occasionally plays organ in Caritas. In his professional life, he is the Director of Music at Brecon Cathedral. We'll get started with talking a little bit about your work at Brecon, if that's okay, and
Yeah.
what you do there.
Okay, so I director of music, which is a full time post I've been doing for about 4 years now. I'm in charge of planning all the music that takes place in the services. And there are two choirs here that sing 4 services a week, and they're all volunteers. We also have a relatively new junior choir, really to try and get more children in the locality singing and as a kind of recruitment tool for the main cathedral choir.
A lot of that stuff is pre-COVID. What's been going on since, well, this time last year, really?
Well, last March, we stopped all choir activities a week before the lockdown started because people were really concerned about the effects of the virus. And then once lockdown kicked in, myself and colleague John Pilgrim were furloughed completely, so we were unable to do any work whatsoever, which was a really bleak time for us personally. It's really strange not to be working at all because I live for work really, and I love doing music as a hobby and get paid for it. So it was really uncertain what was going to happen as time went on, and then of course by September music was allowed back in churches in Wales, but only in a very limited way. I got to play the organ a bit, which was rather nice because I don't get to play very often in my role as director of music. But certainly from a choir standpoint, it was hard. We've heard a lot over the last year about the effects of mental health and well-being on singers and people not being able to even listen to live music. Come November, we were able to go back to singing in the cathedral in a kind of limited way, numbers restricted, distancing, and all that. But you could see, even through the masks, that they were really pleased to be back, and it was really heartening to see that they hadn't forgotten what they've learned over the years. That they're just chomping at the bit now to get back to normal and do normal choir things.
Well, it's
Um,
great to hear that you're able to get them back together again, albeit socially distanced and wearing masks, etc. But
yeah.
it's a step in the right direction. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And so you've mentioned quite a bit about how important cathedral choirs are to developing singers, to young voices, to young people in general, especially in terms of their musicianship. Your
Mm.
early life was at Gloucester Cathedral, am I right?
Indeed, it was. Yes,
So when did you start there?
I was a chorister there from 1988 until my voice broke in the summer of 1993. My father had been a lay clerk since the late 70s, so he was in the choir for 10 years before I joined, and it was very much a family kind of thing. And my mother is a fine soprano singer in her own right, so music was in the family. So it's just a natural kind of progression, really, me becoming a chorister. It was great fun. Sang a really diverse amount of music, and Gloucester being one of the three choirs cathedrals, some of that music was sort of still fresh on the page. The ink hadn't dried yet. So we sang some really wacky stuff and some very memorable concerts in the Three Choirs Festival. So it was really formative time for me as a young musician, really.
I remember as a chorister myself, just learning by osmosis more than anything, and it's so good that that work is still continuing on with what you're doing at Brecon as well.
Yes, it's slightly different here, of course, because the choir is completely voluntary and we don't sing every day. We don't have the early morning rehearsals before school. But it's the same theory behind the practice.
Are you
Um,
actively recruiting choristers still at Brecon?
oh yes, all the time trying to find the next generation. of choristers and indeed lay clerks as well, which is probably harder to find volunteer adult singers who can put in the time and commit to those 3 services a week and still carry on doing their day job.
I'm going to jump on in my questions actually, because you said something really interesting there that's just sparked a memory for me with Caritas as well. So you talk about the choristers, the lay clerks at Brecon being voluntary. I grew up in a choir where the back row were all volunteers as well, and Caritas is all made up of volunteers. In fact, we all pay our £1 to be there at the rehearsals even. And do you think that creates something really special?
Yes, I think you're right, because obviously they're there because they do it for the love of it, and it also puts other things in perspective. The fact that they're not trained singers necessarily. Some of the lay clerks I've got have been in the choir since they were boys. But you're right, the volunteer aspect is cannot be underestimated.
So your work and your life has always revolved around choral music and directing and playing the organ. Has there ever been a deviation to that, or has it always been this one path?
No, never. It's only deviated in terms of whether should I go and study singing or should I go down an organist kind of route. When I was in my late teens, that was the big dilemma. So I ended up studying organ in Huddersfield, which is a sort of little mecca in West Yorkshire for organists. But I very quickly found myself singing alto for the very first time, I should add, in Leeds Parish Church Choir and in the University Early Music Ensemble and other things. So my singing alto, countertenor, really sprung from a shortage of altos at university. And then I decided, well, I should possibly go and get some lessons. So I ended up having lessons in York and deputised at York Minster. And throughout my career, I've been able to sing and play the organ. But since moving to Brecon, the singing aspect has kind of taken a back seat. And it probably leads on to another question you're going to ask me in a minute.
Well, yeah, it's good to circle back to Caritas actually, because your abilities are, well, organists are a rare breed anyway. Countertenors are another rare breed. So to have you in one package is phenomenally valuable to any choir. And I know we've we've used that as much as possible in Caritas at times. The recordings that we did back in November for Christmas, you were singing countertenor on some of the tracks, but also playing the organ on the others because Emma was conducting because Lindsay was unfortunately unwell. So to have that multi-talented person in one package is so valuable. Do you enjoy one aspect more than the other?
That's a really interesting question. I think my insecurities as a singer are always at the back of my mind, as they so often are for singers. So playing the organ, particularly when you're sort of poked around a corner and can't really be seen, is a really safe option, because you just can't focus on the music. You don't have to face an audience. Part of the reason I joined Caritas was to fill a void in my life. I'd just become director of music here, so I wasn't playing the organ as much, but I wasn't doing any singing at all. Whereas before I could nip up to Hereford or Gloucester and sing in the choir there if they needed, but there was no singing at all in my life. And I just happened to see on social media that Caritas was looking for an alto. So I got in touch. And the rest, as they say, is history.
You volunteering your time to come to Caritas rehearsals and support Lindsay in that venture is really appreciated. And you make that trip. It's not the quickest of journeys, is it, from Brecon to Cardiff? And
No.
you do that quite regularly for Caritas. So it's what keeps you coming?
Well, there are a number of things, really. Musically speaking, it's just a joy to be able to sing with like-minded people to such a high standard. It gets me out of the house as well. But apart from that, it's just a great social group as well. To be able to broaden my horizons outside the Brecon bubble really helps my day job as well. I get new ideas, musical and otherwise, about how to do things, and it's just such a great group.
Obviously, that connection goes both ways as well, doesn't it? Because Caritas has been up to Brecon to perform a concert at the cathedral.
But that was a really good occasion. I think it was great for the cathedral to host the concert, and certainly the feedback locally was wonderful. And it was great to host my friends as well to the cathedral.
A lovely place to sing. And you've performed your solo from Brecon Cathedral. Can you tell us something about that, please?
Well, yes, I can only in as far as Peritan is one of those very, very early composers. Nothing much is known about. So I was drawn to the piece. Well, in fact, I was asked to sing it at a service several years ago, probably, I don't know, a couple of decades ago, as a part of a visiting choir at St David's. And the tenors and basses of the choir provided a D drone as I sang the melody line. And I was struck then, as I am now, how amazingly beautiful the melody is. It's just a single line of music, but it's so expressive. It speaks from the heart. And it's a verse 1 of quite a long poem in honour of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which talks about how immaculate she is, and even in childbirth, how pure she is. It's a lovely piece to sing, especially where I position myself for this recording, just in front of the high altar at the cathedral, where the acoustic has a lovely bloom on it. I hope that comes across as well. So I really enjoyed particularly singing Beata Viscera. I hope that our listeners enjoy it too.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We'll leave it there and we'll play your recording now.
Thank you.